Give it all to her. The words echoed in the courtroom, hanging in the sudden, sharp silence. I felt the collective gasp, the subtle shift in the air. People looked at me, Mark, as if I'd lost my mind, or perhaps just been broken beyond repair. My attorney, Arthur, a man who rarely showed surprise, just stared. Sarah, my soon-to-be ex-wife, across the room, looked utterly bewildered. But before you judge me, before you think I was just some passive fool, let me tell you what I found on her phone at 2 o'clock in the morning. My name is Mark. I'm 54 years old, and for the past 3 decades, I've worked as a building inspector in Sacramento, California. My days are spent walking into structures that, from the outside, often look perfectly solid. My job is to find the rot hiding under fresh paint. Cracked foundations. Water damage behind drywall. Electrical work that's a fire waiting to happen in 5 years. You learn to spot the signs early, those small things that tell you something's wrong long before the whole thing collapses. I never, not once, thought I'd have to use those same instincts on my own marriage. Sarah and I had been together for 22 years. We had a daughter, Chloe, who was 16 and, honestly, smarter than both of us combined. For most of those years, things were fine. Or so I believed. Sarah worked part-time at a dental office, managed the house, did all the mom things. We weren't rich, but we were stable. Then, about 10 months ago, she told me she wanted to start a business. Home staging, she called it, helping people sell houses by making them look better. She said she'd always had an eye for design, that she wanted something of her own. I supported her. Enthusiastically, even. I helped her set up the LLC, co-signed on a business credit card, let her use our joint savings to buy initial inventory. I truly thought it was good for her to have a project. I had absolutely no idea what I was actually funding. The first crack in our foundation appeared one Wednesday night. I woke up around 2 in the morning because I heard movement downstairs. My first thought was Chloe, maybe she couldn't sleep. But it was Sarah, in the kitchen, illuminated by the blue glow of her phone. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. When she noticed me, she flipped the phone over, too fast, a movement so sudden it was almost a flinch. I asked if everything was okay. She said it was just a client being annoying at weird hours. I nodded and went back upstairs, but something felt off. That small detail, the way she moved. It registered. The next morning, her phone was on the counter while she was in the shower. I'm not proud of it, but I looked. The messages were still open. I saw things like, the new place is almost ready and you're unstoppable. And then one that made my stomach drop, can't wait to be free of the dead weight. I didn't confront her. I didn't yell or throw the phone or demand explanations. I just put it back down, made coffee, and went to work. Because I've learned that when you find a problem in a structure, you don't start swinging a hammer right away. You document, you measure, you figure out how deep it goes. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things. Small things at first. A throw blanket my mom had given us years ago disappeared. Then, a lamp from the living room. A chair from the dining set. Sarah said she was using them for staging jobs, that she'd bring them back, but they never came back. Then bigger items started vanishing. Our coffee table. The bookshelf from the hallway. And then one Saturday, I came home from inspecting a commercial site, and the couch was gone. Not our couch, but a couch. A cheap beige sectional that looked like it came from a discount warehouse. Chloe walked in behind me, saw it, and just stopped. She looked at me with this exhausted expression and said, "So the couch just died, I guess." Sarah came down the stairs with her phone in her hand and said it was temporary, that the other one was at a staging job and this was just a loaner. Chloe just said, "Sure, Mom, whatever," and went upstairs. I watched my daughter's face and I knew she didn't believe it either. Our house was starting to feel empty, like we were living in a showroom instead of a home. But I still didn't say anything. I kept watching. Then about 2 weeks later, Chloe came into my home office with her laptop. She had this nervous energy, like she didn't want to tell me but felt like she had to. She turned the screen toward me. "Dad, I found something weird." It was Facebook Marketplace. Sarah was selling our stuff, our furniture, our belongings, under a fake name. The account wasn't hers. It was listed under Jennifer Callahan, but the photos were taken in our house. I could see our walls, our floors. There was the throw blanket, the lamp, the coffee table, all listed as gently used with prices that were way below what they were worth. Chloe asked if I knew about this. I told her I didn't. She asked if she should say something to her mom. No, I told her. Let me handle it. I took screenshots of everything. I made a folder on my computer, started keeping track. This wasn't staging. This was liquidation. She was selling off our home piece by piece, and she was hiding it. Then the real punch came. I got a letter in the mail from the 529 plan we'd set up for Chloe's college fund. There was a withdrawal. $8,000 gone. I called the company immediately. They told me the withdrawal was authorized by the joint account holder, Sarah Bowen. I asked when. They said 3 weeks ago. I hung up and just sat there, staring at the wall. That money was supposed to be untouchable. We'd been putting into it since Chloe was born. It wasn't for us. It was for her future. When Sarah got home that night, I asked her about it. I kept my voice calm. I told her I saw the 529 statement. She didn't even flinch. She said she needed it for the business, that it was technically our money and she'd pay it back. I told her it was Chloe's money. She said, "Kids figure it out, that student loans exist," that I was being dramatic. I just nodded. I didn't argue. But that night, I realized something. She wasn't building a business. She was building an exit. And she didn't care who she buried on the way out. So, I started documenting everything. Every transaction, every receipt, every piece of furniture that walked out the door. I made spreadsheets. I took photos. I tracked every dollar. And then I found a charge on our joint credit card I didn't recognize. A storage unit. Industrial area, $180 a month. I didn't ask her about it. I just added it to the file because I knew what was coming. And when it did, I was going to be ready. Here's what I learned from 20 years of inspecting buildings: the most dangerous problems aren't the ones you can see right away. It's the slow leak behind the wall, the hairline crack in the foundation that spreads an inch every year. By the time most people notice, the damage is catastrophic. Sarah's plan was the same. Gradual, calculated, designed to look normal until it was too late. But she made one critical mistake. She assumed I wouldn't pay attention to the details. Have you ever ignored small warning signs in a relationship, thinking they'd just go away on their own? For the next 6 weeks, I lived like I was conducting the most important inspection of my career. I had a filing system in my home office that would make an accountant weep with joy. Bank statements with transactions highlighted in yellow. Credit card bills with charges circled in red. Photos of every piece of furniture that had disappeared, time-stamped and cataloged. I had a spreadsheet tracking the storage unit payments. Another one for the business expenses that made no sense. Sarah thought I was just working late, buried in permit applications and violation reports. She had no idea I was building a case. The storage unit was the piece that bothered me most. Why would someone running a legitimate staging business need a separate storage facility when we had a 2-car garage that was basically empty? I drove past it one Saturday morning. Industrial area, chain-link fence, units that looked like they hadn't been painted since the 90s. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I just needed to know it existed. I needed one person I could trust to look at the numbers. Someone who'd tell me if I was seeing things or if this was as bad as I thought. I called George, my buddy from high school who'd become a CPA in Phoenix, Arizona. We met at his place one evening, just the two of us in his basement. I brought the files. George went through everything with his reading glasses on, making little noises every few pages. After about 40 minutes, he looked up at me and said, "She's either terrible at business or she's hiding money. Maybe both." He showed me the patterns, money going into the business account, but not much coming out where it should, expenses that didn't match up with revenue. The staging business showed virtually no profit, but she was spending like it was thriving. Then, George said something that changed everything. He said, "Mark, listen to me. Ownership isn't just about assets. It's about liabilities, too. If she takes everything in a divorce, she takes all the debt, all the taxes, all the penalties that come with it." I sat back in my chair and just stared at him. He asked if I understood what he was saying. I told him I understood perfectly. 3 weeks later, Sarah served me with divorce papers. Not in some dramatic public scene, just at breakfast on a Sunday morning. Chloe was still asleep upstairs. Sarah's sister, Brenda, was there, sitting at our kitchen table like she'd been invited to a business meeting. Sarah had a list. She wanted the house, both cars, 100% of the business, and 50-50 on my pension. Then she said, "Chloe can stay with you. I don't have time to deal with a teenager right now." Brenda nodded like this was all perfectly reasonable. I just sat there with my coffee. I didn't react. I didn't argue. Then I heard a noise from the hallway. Chloe was standing there in her pajamas. She'd heard everything. She looked at her mother and said, "Wow, Mom. Really feeling the love here." Sarah told her not to be dramatic. Chloe didn't say anything else. She just turned around and went back upstairs. I heard her bedroom door close. That's when I knew I wasn't just protecting money or property anymore. I was protecting my daughter from being erased. I looked at Sarah and said, "Okay, you can have it." Brenda's face lit up like she just won the lottery. Sarah looked confused, like she'd been expecting a fight and didn't know what to do when she didn't get one. She asked if I was serious. I told her I'd have my lawyer draw up the papers. Then I left the table and went to work. That afternoon, I called Arthur Braddock. He'd handled a property dispute for me years ago. The kind of attorney who reads every word of every document like he's defusing a bomb. I also looked at apartments and signed a lease on a 2-bedroom place across town by the end of the week. Chloe needed somewhere stable that wasn't filled with constant tension, and I needed space to think clearly. I met Arthur at his office the next day and laid out everything. The marketplace listings, the 529 withdrawal, the storage unit, the business financials that George had gone through. Arthur looked at it all and said, "This is gold, but we don't wave it around." He explained the strategy. We'd give her what she wanted, but we'd structure it so she couldn't wriggle out later. The house would be hers, but she'd have to refinance it in her name within 90 days, or it goes up for sale. No extensions, no excuses. The $8,000 from Chloe's college fund would be offset against her share of assets, paid back immediately. The business would be hers completely, which meant all the debts, all the vendor obligations, all the potential tax issues that came with unreported income. Arthur drafted the agreement. It was clean on the surface. She gets the house, the cars, the business. I keep my pension. She gets nothing from it. Everything disclosed in the appendices, Exhibits C through F, 214 pages of financial records, business documents, transaction histories, all attached, all incorporated. Arthur told me most people don't read the appendices. They just initial and sign. 2 weeks later, Sarah tried to get cute. She filed an emergency motion claiming I was wasting marital assets. She said I bought a boat. I don't own a boat. Never have. Arthur submitted my bank record showing no boat purchase. The judge tossed it in about 5 minutes. Then someone filed an anonymous complaint with my employer claiming I'd taken bribes on inspections. It went nowhere because it wasn't true, but it was clearly meant to rattle me. Then Brenda showed up at the house one evening demanding to see Chloe, claiming it was urgent. We'd installed a video doorbell by then. Chloe recorded the whole thing. Brenda spent 10 minutes at the door insisting Sarah had rights, that I was poisoning Chloe against her mother. Chloe told her through the intercom that if her mom wanted to talk, she could call like a normal person. Brenda finally left. Arthur said, "Keep all of it. This is leverage if we need it." The mediation was scheduled for early June. We met at a conference room downtown. Sarah showed up with her lawyer, Olivia Thompson, who had a reputation for being aggressive but not particularly detail-oriented. Brenda was there too, sitting behind Sarah like a coach. Olivia had the settlement agreement in front of her. She was flipping through pages fast, barely stopping. Arthur sat next to me, completely calm. The mediator went through the terms. Sarah gets sole ownership of the house, the cars, the business assets. I get my pension. No split. Custody of Chloe stays with me. $8,000 offset for the college fund withdrawal. Brenda was leaning forward, whispering to Sarah something about how the pension was where my real money was, and she should fight for it. Sarah ignored her. She was too focused on the house, the cars, the idea of keeping everything. Olivia got to the signature page and pointed. She told Sarah to initial here, here, and here, then sign at the bottom. I watched Sarah sign without reading a single appendix. Olivia barely glanced at them either. Arthur cleared his throat and said, "Just to confirm, Exhibits C through F are incorporated as attached. All 214 pages." The mediator asked if both parties acknowledged receipt and review. I said yes. Sarah said yes. Olivia said yes. Arthur made a note. The final hearing was set for June 14th in front of Judge Evans. We all stood up. Sarah looked at me with this little smile, like she just played me. Brenda squeezed her shoulder. They walked out looking like they'd won. Arthur packed up his briefcase and said, "She has no idea what she just signed." I asked if he was sure this would hold. He said, "Mark, not reading properly disclosed documents isn't grounds for appeal. It's malpractice, and that's her lawyer's problem, not ours." We left the building. I sat in my truck for a few minutes. Chloe texted asking how it went. I told her I'd explain at home. She sent back a thumbs up. I started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot. Sarah thought she'd won. She had no clue what was buried in those appendices. And in 10 days, Judge Evans was going to read them out loud. When someone demands everything in a divorce, what are they really asking for? Most people think it's just about money or property. But here's the truth, they're asking to own the consequences, too. Every debt, every obligation, every mistake they made that they think is hidden. Sarah wanted control. What she got was accountability. The morning of June 14th, I woke up at 5:30 and couldn't fall back asleep. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the sun come up through the window. Chloe came down around 6, already dressed. She asked if I was nervous. I told her no, just ready for it to be over. She poured herself orange juice and said, "Dad, whatever happens today, I'm glad I'm here with you." I didn't trust myself to say much, so I just nodded. We got to the courthouse at 8:45. Arthur was waiting outside the courtroom in his usual dark suit, briefcase in hand. He asked if I was ready. I told him I'd been ready for months. Chloe squeezed my arm and said she'd wait in the hallway. She didn't want to be in the room when it all went down. We walked in and took our seats at the table on the left. Sarah was already there on the right side with Olivia. Brenda was in the first row behind them, dressed like she was attending a wedding. Sarah looked confident, relaxed even. She glanced over at me once and there was that same little smile from the mediation. Olivia had a thin folder in front of her. Arthur had 3 binders stacked neatly, each one tabbed and labeled. Judge Evans came in at 9 on the dot. Everyone stood. She was in her early 60s, gray hair pulled back, the kind of judge who'd seen every trick in the book and had no patience for nonsense. She sat down, opened the file, and told everyone else to sit. She looked at both of us and said we were here to finalize the dissolution of marriage, that both parties had agreed to terms at mediation. She asked if we both understood and accepted those terms as written. Sarah said, "Yes, Your Honor." I said, "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Evans started going through the standard language: property division, no spousal support, custody arrangements. It was all procedural, exactly what we'd agreed to. Brenda was smiling. Then Arthur stood up. He said, "Your Honor, just for the record, the settlement agreement incorporates Exhibits C through F as attached, 214 pages of financial disclosures and business documentation." Judge Evans looked up. She asked if both parties had received copies of these exhibits. Arthur said, "Yes, Your Honor." Provided at mediation and acknowledged in writing. The judge turned to Olivia and asked, "Did you review these exhibits with your client? Yes or no?" The courtroom got very quiet. Olivia froze. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked down at her thin folder like the answer might be hiding in there. Judge Evans repeated the question, slower this time. Olivia finally said, "Your Honor, we reviewed the primary terms of the agreement." Judge Evans' expression didn't change, but her tone dropped about 10 degrees. She said, "Counselor, that's not what I asked." She flipped to a page in the file and said, "According to the mediator's notes, you signed a statement confirming receipt and review of all attached exhibits. Is that your signature?" Olivia said yes. "But, Your Honor, if I may explain," Judge Evans cut her off. "No, you may not. I asked a yes or no question, and you answered it." Arthur sat down. I could feel Sarah starting to tense up next to Olivia. Judge Evans opened one of the binders in front of her. She said, "Let's go through what's actually in these exhibits since apparently we need to." She started reading. Exhibit C shows outstanding vendor obligations for the staging business totaling $47,000. Exhibit D documents a storage facility with accumulated late fees and code violations totaling approximately $6,000. Exhibit E includes correspondence from 3 different creditors regarding unpaid invoices. Exhibit F contains copies of business income records that appear to show unreported revenue, which may trigger an inquiry from the IRS. Brenda's smile was gone. Sarah's face had gone completely white. Olivia was flipping through papers trying to find something to say. Judge Evans kept going. She said, "Mrs. Bowen, you agreed to take sole ownership of the business and all assets associated with it, which means you also took sole responsibility for all debts, obligations, and potential tax liabilities associated with those assets. Do you understand that now?" Sarah didn't answer right away. She turned to Olivia and said, "You told me everything was fine." Olivia said, "We can file a motion to reconsider based on..." Judge Evans cut her off. "Based on what, counselor?" "Based on your client not reading documents that were properly disclosed and that you confirmed reviewing?" She looked at Sarah and said, "Mrs. Bowen, your husband disclosed everything. It was in the appendices. You signed a document acknowledging receipt. This agreement is exactly what you asked for." Brenda stood up in the gallery and said, "This is fraud. This is entrapment." Judge Evans told her to sit down immediately or she'd be removed from the courtroom. Brenda sat. Sarah looked across the table at me. Her eyes were wild, desperate. She said, "You knew. You knew all of this." I kept my voice calm. I said, "I disclosed everything, Sarah. It was in the appendices. You signed acknowledging receipt. You wanted sole ownership, and you got it. Arthur added, Your Honor, just to be clear, all financial records were obtained legally. All debts listed are legitimate business obligations. Nothing was hidden or fabricated. Judge Evans closed the binder. She said, I'm going to be very clear. The time to realize what you were signing was before you signed it, not after. This agreement was negotiated, mediated, and signed by both parties. I'm entering it as written. She looked at Olivia and said, Counselor, your client's failure to read properly disclosed documents is not grounds for appeal. That's a malpractice issue between you and her. Olivia's face went red. Judge Evans continued. She said, Mrs. Bowen, you have 90 days to refinance the house in your name alone or the property will be listed for sale. No extensions. The $8,000 offset for the college fund withdrawal will be paid within 30 days. You retain full ownership and full liability for the business. She signed the order. She said, This dissolution is final. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. Everyone stood. Sarah just sat there staring at the table. Brenda was already heading for the door. Olivia packed up her folder without looking at Sarah. Arthur shook my hand and said, I'll file the refinance motion in 91 days if needed. We walked out into the hallway. Chloe was waiting on a bench by the windows. She stood up when she saw me. I told her it was done. She asked how bad it was for her mom. I said, bad enough. Then I told her the judge locked in the offset. Her college fund would be whole again within 30 days. Chloe's eyes got bright. She hugged me hard and said, You absolute legend. We left the courthouse. Over the next 3 months, I watched it all fall apart for Sarah exactly the way Arthur said it would. She couldn't refinance because her credit was trashed and the business income didn't support the mortgage. Arthur filed the motion. Judge Evans ordered the house listed for sale. It sold fast, but for less than Sarah hoped, because she was desperate. After the mortgage payoff, the liens, the property taxes, and the realtor commission, there was almost nothing left. The storage unit got inspected after a complaint about fire code violations. The lease was terminated and she got hit with penalties for improper storage of flammable materials. Creditors started seizing inventory to cover debts. The staging business collapsed in about 6 weeks. Then the IRS sent letters requesting documentation and scheduling an audit. They wanted explanations for why reported income didn't match bank deposits. Sarah moved in with Brenda. I heard they lasted about a month before the fighting got too bad. Chloe stayed with me in the apartment. She made honor roll that semester, a 3.6 GPA. We started new routines, movie nights on Saturdays, pancakes on Sunday mornings. She seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted. One night, she asked me if I felt bad about what happened to her mom. I thought about it for a while. I told her I felt bad that it came to this, but I didn't feel bad for protecting her future and making sure her mom faced the consequences of her own choices. Chloe nodded. She said, Good, because I don't either. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Sometimes the best thing you can do is step back and let people have exactly what they asked for, especially when they're so sure they know better than you. Sarah wanted everything. She got it. And it buried her. The house I've learned to inspect isn't just made of wood and concrete. It's made of choices. Some people build solid foundations. Others cut corners, hide the damage, and hope no one notices until they're gone. But eventually, every structure gets inspected. And when it does, the truth comes out. Sarah thought she was playing me. She thought I was too trusting, too passive, too focused on my work to see what she was doing. She was wrong. I saw everything. I just waited for the right moment to let her bury herself. If there's one thing my job has taught me, it's this: you can paint over rot, but it doesn't make the rot go away. It just makes it someone else's problem when the walls finally come down. Sarah wanted to own everything. Now she owns the consequences. And me? I'm sitting in a small apartment with my daughter, eating pancakes on Sunday mornings, watching her thrive. That's the foundation I built, and it's the only one that matters. Would you have done the same?